Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's live demo here in Seattle, where I am, just north of our roastery in Olympia. It's noon if you are on the East Coast near our Atlanta roastery, or wherever you are. There are folks all over who are watching. I really appreciate you coming here to be with us today. It makes me feel really good to know that there are folks watching and hopefully learning something. So I wanted to start today by talking about what we're going to do. And if you've seen some of these deeper dives, you're pretty aware what we're going to talk about is a specific coffee that we offer. And then in this case, as it's a blend, we're going to talk about the type of blend it is, as well as some of the other elements of the blend. In this case, the fact that it's fair trade and organic certified. And so I want to start by introducing it. So the coffee today is another one of our, we call these our flagships in a sense. Last week we talked about Dancing Goats, which is the undeniable flagship blend of coffee that Batdorf Bronson has. This week we're really talking about our flagship organic coffee in a sense. It's a blend. But when it comes to a coffee that is really loved by our barista community and by many of our customers, Whirling Dervish is really the coffee that we talk about. Whirling Dervish is a blend of, in this case, a coffee from a single origin, but roasted in two different ways. So what does that mean? So in the case of this coffee, we're talking about an organic fair trade coffee. If you recall, and I'm going to shoot us over here to our monitor really quick. What we're attempting to do with a blend is, because coffee is an agricultural product, that it changes from year to year, and it also changes across time after a harvest has been made, when it's in its green state. Blends allow us to adjust internal recipes and roast profiles in order to create a consistent cup of quality in a cup, I should say. So in this case, we are working with an organic fair trade coffee that last week, if you recall, we talked about multiple origin coffees playing a part in making a blend. In this case, we are going to work on pulling out some flavors, and we'll talk about them really quick here. I'll reintroduce our flavor wheel for folks. And I found a tool here that I want to introduce us to as well. That's that I found on a website called Not Bad Coffee. I want to make sure to give them some credit for that, right? So if you want to come check this out, it's an interactive flavor wheel. And again, the interiors, we start with qualities on the interior of the flavor wheel, in this case fruity, right? And then it's going to break down the next level of the wheel right there. So in that case with fruity, it then broke it down to berry, dried fruit, other fruit, right? So it's kind of fun to take a deeper look at a coffee by using an interactive wheel like this. So for sure, notbadcoffee.com, the interactive flavor wheel, if you want to check that out. It's kind of fun to play with. In this case, we're talking about flavors of cherry, molasses, and chocolate. So if we go over here, we can actually find cherry, right? And in cherry, take a look at what we're talking about here. Sour, fruity, slightly bitter, floral, aromatic associated with cherries, right? We also have molasses and chocolate. I'll come here, see if we can find. We have cocoa. I don't see chocolate per se. Let's see what we have here. Here's chocolate, right? It's a subcategory of cocoa. So here's an important thing to think about when we're talking about chocolate, as opposed to saying cocoa when we're describing a coffee. In this case, look at those words, cocoa butter. There's dark roasted aromatics as well, but the cocoa butter I want to hold on to because of a sensual quality that it brings to a coffee in relation to body. But you'll see there, if we take a look back at our these here, Pull up the flavor wheel as well. Um, we're definitely in a zone of flavors, right? So you can see that we have a darkness represented here. We have these cherries, and it said right there just a little bit of bitterness. We often think of bitterness as exclusively like a kind of a bad thing, but it's not necessarily um, bad. It's about its balance, right? A little bit of bitterness or sometimes people think of acidity as a bad thing, but no, we want some of those qualities to be present. When we think about the bitterness of chocolate, that's not a negative quality on our palate. In fact, it plays with the other aspects of the chocolate. Same thing when we talk about the bitterness of cherry. That's actually very pleasant, right? So these are the things we're highlighting, and then we, of course, augment them with the sweetness. In this case, we talk about a molasses sweetness, right? So those are aspects of the coffee when we think about the things we're bringing out that are inherent in the seed, but really what we're doing is we are adding a roast profile that allows those things to, for lack of a better term, bloom, to come forward, to be present for us to taste and have an experience. In the case of this blend of coffee, we're talking about cherry, chocolate, and molasses. Now, I want to take the next step in this conversation here to, we'll take this away for a moment, to discuss the aspect of this coffee, which I think it's really great to use it as an example. So remember, last week we talked about a blend of coffee, Dancing Goats. And with Dancing Goats, we discussed that several origins are used. And those origins are from Latin America, from Asia Pacific. Those regions produce coffees, and the varietals that we find there produce flavor components that we blend together in different ratios and proportions to create the blend. And we're always seeking to have that end cup of coffee, whether it's espresso or drip, be very, very knowable and very much kind of the same across the agricultural year and from year to year, right? We really want, when someone drinks Dancing Goats, for that coffee experience, if they had it 10 years ago or if they have it 10 years in the future, for those flavors, those aromatics, that experience on the palate to be the same. And that's why the blend allows us to do that. We love and celebrate our single origins, of course, because they're unique. They're snapshots in time of a farm, of a practice that was used in the processing of the coffee, and we love those. And we have blends because we work with both sourcing and roasting to have a consistent cup. Now, Whirling Dervish is a great example of using roasting to create an effect and to create an endpoint experience in the cup. In this case, we're using a coffee which is a single origin organic fair trade coffee, and it's a blend because we actually apply two different roast profiles to the same coffee, and then we adjust the ratio to get the right balance of the two different elements of the coffee that we're bringing up based off of the way we've roasted it, right? So what I did was, here's the blend itself. You pull it right up to the camera there, you can get a closer look at it, right? So that's just pouring it straight out of our lovely 12-ounce bag here. And then I took some and I separated out. And you can hopefully tell, my light's good enough here, that we have a lighter roast and a darker roast, right? So it's the same coffee. We have simply roasted it to two different roast profiles in order to highlight different elements of that coffee. You know, when we return to our flavor wheel, we know that bound up within that lovely little seed are all these different elements that we're trying to capture, right? And right in front of my face. And so what we are really wanting to do is is highlight the different components based off of what the roasting can do. There are things inside of that seed which are genetic or are an aspect of the terroir, right? Well, the rain was like that season. When the coffee was picked, its ripeness at picking, and then also its processing. We don't really have any control over those things other than through Bob's work in sourcing the coffee, right? But what we absolutely have the ability to control is what we do with the coffee once we have it. So I'm going to switch over to the monitor here, and I want to direct you. Often when we go to the monitor, I want to show you where our coffees are on a page. But in this case, I'm going to go to a blog post that we have, which I'd love to direct you to, and we'll put it up in our comments here. So the blog post really talks about the best coffee roast, right? So often when folks are talking about the coffee they like, they'll refer to, how is or one of the questions they'll ask folks in outreach is, what's the best roast for coffee? And our answer is, as you might guess, it kind of depends. It depends on what you're looking for in a coffee, because we roast across a spectrum. As you could see in that blend right there, we have a coffee that's been roasted in two different ways, and then we combine it to create a unified cup of coffee. But really, the determination for you is to go and do some. Read this article here, please do, on when you have a moment, and we talk a little bit about what occurs at the different levels of roast. So we break it into three categories. We talk about light roast, medium roast, and a dark roast. And again, it's a spectrum. And then as you look at that, you'll see that different elements come out of a coffee, regardless of its origin, at different levels of roast. And what we're attempting to do with a blend like this, again, is use a coffee that we think has a lot of potential, and that we can move through those different levels of roast and highlight different qualities that we can then represent in the cup. So I would absolutely recommend that you take a look at this post here. I'm going to go back to our cell cam here and take that away. Actually, I'm going to try and do this. Here we are. That's better. And we'll move that away. Don't need the flavor wheel right now. Position this a little bit better. So you will recognize now I'm using the method that I think is really great for folks as they're getting into enjoying coffees, whether they're blends or single origins, and that's the this clever dripper. And I'll talk again why I love the clever dripper as people move up into brewing at home and really learning to capture different elements of oh, hi Lania, nice to hear that. Yes, many people's favorite blend, this one, because of those dark roast qualities that we get out of the coffee. So looking at the clever dripper, you'll see it looks like a Melita, and it uses in this case a number 4 Melita filter, but the special thing about it is that it actually is an immersion brewer, which means that we're going to pour the coffee in, and it's going to stay in immersion while the flavors are extracting, and then we will release the coffee all at once. So as opposed to a dripper or pour over where you're putting water onto the coffee with a little bit of agitation, and the motion of the water moving down through the coffee is pulling the flavor out, and we adjust our pour rate and other elements in order to capture the right things we want from the coffee. This is a little bit easier to do, but then so it's like a French press in that sense. You put the coffee in, you put your water in, and you wait, right? And the immersion is what does the brewing. But it brings in the additional element of a paper filter, which I think is, and this is why I call it kind of a nice transition coffee into home brewing, where you now add in that filtration with the paper, and you'll start noticing that it creates a different experience on your palate, and maybe one that's even more recognizable with a coffee blend like this. So last week you might remember that we talked about dark roast coffees, knowing that there is a component of dark roast within our Dancing Goats. Now, as you might guess, because we have a higher representation of a darker roasted coffee in this blend, we're going to do the same thing we did last week, which is that we're going to lower the temperature of our water going into the immersion, because darker roasted coffee, a little more brittle, a little more porous, which means that it's going to, anything that we extract from it is going to come out easier, right? That then means that we have to moderate the way we're brewing the coffee so that we don't pull too many of the things we don't want. What we want is sweetness. We want flavor notes, like chocolate and molasses. We want the nice aspects of the acidity and a little bit of that bitterness, just a little bit, right, to balance those things out. But we don't want to get into woody or ashy qualities that would come out if we oversteep the coffee. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to lower the temperature of the water going in, and that's going to help us moderate that. So I'm going to go ahead and add water to my coffee here. You see I'm using a scale. I'm using a 1 to 16. So I'm going to go up to about 450. I'm just doing a little bit of, see, it's a little bit more forgiving in that. Really what I'm doing here is I'm adding water in a way that kind of stirs the coffee and agitates it, right? I start my timer. And then just right before I put this lid on to retain a little bit of heat, I'm going to give it a pretty vigorous stir, right? There we are. And our timer is rolling. So while our timer is going, I'm going to return back over to the blog post here, and I want to talk a little bit about some other elements of the organic Whirling Dervish. So, of course, I'd love for you to go to the page, read about it. You can always pull up the detailed coffee report there, so by all means. And then if you look underneath the detailed coffee report, you'll see that we have 2 certifications here. One is it's certified organic, and the other is it's fair trade certified. So just as I asked for you to take a look at the coffee roast blog, which I'm going to go ahead and just put up into our comments right now, so you can all access that if you like. I'm also going to direct us to another blog post that we have, which talks about fair trade coffee. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that up as well for you all to read when you have the time. I really do recommend you visit the blog when you can. We have a lot of great information on there. We have some talented folks who have in the past written for us, so we have a pretty deep archive. And then we have Tasha down in Texas who works with Riley to coordinate these blog posts, and they're really great. They're really informative. It's a wide range of things that you can find on our blog, which I would love for you to make use of. So there's a couple of links that have been sent out now that you can use. When you look at this one about fair trade, what we talk about here is that fair trade coffees is a certification. Fair trade is a certification through an organization, Fair Trade USA. And basically that means that they have a set of standards which we comply with, just like complying with organic certification, which allows us to use that label. And mostly it has to do with the economic compensation that's being offered, but there are other things as well. You should know that we consider this something we do in addition to what's most important for us, which is our relationships, right? So relationship coffee. We have relationships going back with farmers for decades now. And as a part of having a relationship and part of doing things the right way, which is what we're always striving to do, paying a fair price for coffee has always been at the very top of that, because that's equitable. They are working very hard to produce this coffee. We are asking a lot of the coffee, and we're seeking very specific coffee. And farmers work with us to to take feedback and to create coffees and to send us samples that hit that spot that we need it to be at. And so a fair price has always been central to that, meaning that we're always, above fair trade prices in our coffee. But that doesn't mean we should not also seek certification where certification can be had, specifically if we're dealing with co-ops that work with fair trade exclusively. We want to be able to support that as well. So fair trade is something we do in addition to maintaining relationships across our coffee. Another fair trade coffee I would point out, and this is again getting into single origins, is organic Costa Rica Terra del Fuego. Sorry, Cerro del Fuego. Terra del Fuego. Great. It's only live, whatever. So I got to go down to Costa Rica and visit our friends at Orca, and it was a great experience to go and be a part of that relationship. So this is again a relationship. I don't know if I can get these up on the screen here. So the area around the processing facility that Efe Orca has, of course, and that is where the trucks will come in to the processing center. Bad shot there. So we've had a relationship with these farmers going back over a decade now, and that relationship exists because of the work that's done in going down to origin, right? It's built up through meeting folks directly, having face-to-face relationships with them. And, what was great, there's your coffees drying there at the same facility. And, these are the relationships we're talking about. There's Bob. These go back like years and years. Water tank or a tank that receives the coffee. Again, the aspect of price has always been there for us, and that's something that we really like to communicate with our customers. When people look at the coffee we're buying, we have to know that behind that coffee is a relationship, and as part of that relationship, price always has to be a consideration, and that means a fair price, a price that allows farmers to continue to do their work so that they are able to be paid above the cost of their labor, right? Costa Rica is a special case because they have lots of pretty strong and stringent rules around the coffee trade. But a lot of places where we source coffee, the coffee roasters, the people sourcing the coffee, kind of have to sometimes make up for maybe some of the controls. And you'll find that across several other relationships that we deal with. So that's a single origin coffee. Coming back to our organic Whirling Dervish, I have actually finished brewing the coffee. I have it now here. I've remembered both my vessel for extracting the coffee and my mug. Sometimes I don't remember the mug because, I'm rushing around in the morning. And I can't, of course, fall back on the old joke that I haven't had my coffee yet as I'm rushing around to do the show. I often have had my coffee as I'm rushing around to do the show. I just, I get a little harried. So this is a cup of our Whirling Dervish. I want to remind everyone that you can, of course, here it comes. See if I can do it out of the way. Boom, there it is. Our coupon code for watching these live videos. You use the code WatchAndLearn10, and that allows you to get 10% off of your purchase. I would ask you to use the links that were sent out for the blog posts and read up on some of those subjects. I really would ask you to avail yourself of that. I mean, it's there. It's for you. It's for our customers. It's for the community that we build out of our cafes and out of our roastery. And this is a great time to read up a little bit more and learn a little bit more about some of these issues, about both organics and about fair trade and about the relationships that are built. We have a relationship with you, right now, and I appreciate the fact that you're taking time out of your day to watch this, whether you're watching it live or watching it later in the day. The 10% discount is a way to say thank you for that, and it's also a way to hopefully incentivize you to hop onto the website and take a look at some of those articles and then ask questions. You can connect with us directly there. You can always ask questions in the feed here. I'll go back through and see. I don't have any questions from folks at this point. Just yes, my favorite blend too. Actually, it's not my favorite blend. I like it, but I love Dancing Goats. But this is a great coffee as well, and it's a great example of how we use roast to affect a blend, to take a coffee, use two different preparations in the roasting process, blend them together in the right proportions, and then create a cup of coffee that is able to capture those things we want from a darker roast, and then balance it with those things that we can capture from the same coffee by applying a slightly lighter roast. You know what? When I love this coffee, I'll tell you right now. It's just before in the fall, right? Because of that darker roast component. For some reason, in the fall, I love this coffee. And then the funny thing is, we then usually create a holiday blend around the same time as well. So I'm competing, because if we didn't have a holiday blend, this would be the coffee I drank, probably through the winter. And then my palate usually kind of lightens up as we get into the spring and the summer, and then switches maybe towards more Africans at that time as well. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the coffee talk with me today. I hope you learned something. I hope you go to the website and use, by all means, those resources there in our blog. And the blog goes back, gosh, there's stuff in there from almost 15 years ago, articles. So you can also kind of listen to our voice across time, because what we learn is always changing as well, just like what you learn is changing. So I hope this has been enjoyable for you. I look forward to seeing folks tomorrow. I think Bob and I are maybe working on a cupping tomorrow. We'll post tonight if that's going to be the case. And then we have more great content coming out from both Brendan and Ben this week as well. So please check back in tomorrow at 9 a.m. And also check back in tomorrow at 1 o'clock our Pacific time, 4 o'clock Eastern time. Brendan will have a show here on Wednesday. Wednesday is kind of the big day. And then we're also working on a tour of the roastery with our friend Jim in Olympia. So I'll be talking with him today. We might be able to pull that off on Thursday. I don't know yet though. So, but we would love to get folks in and to see, to see the roastery. Often I spend time actually giving roasting tours. Obviously, I'm not doing that now because the roastery is kind of locked down. But Jim is roastery. So we're going to work on getting our Zoom connection through cellular and wireless at the right level so that we can bring it into the production here. And then Jim can give a nice tour and talk about some of our other sustainable practices that are rooted there in our production facility. And that might be enjoyable for you as well. Anyway, I've talked long enough. Hopefully you're brewing some coffee for yourself. Go out and enjoy it, and come back, and we'll see you next time right here. Have a good day.